Hello, can you hear me? Yes. It's not pleasant to have the panel, which is not a plenary one, in such a large room. So can I ask those that are here that you just sit in the front rows so that at least we can try to have some interaction, please? Because then it feels a little bit awkward to have
some presence here.
So if you can come forward and sit in the front rows, that will make it really easy for us to have some interaction and discussion, because that's, in fact, one of the goals of this panel.
Otherwise, you will not come to Lycksele just by, like, you know, no.
Okay. 5 minutes past, so I think we can start.
Perfect.
Okay, so let us start. So thank you for coming. Sorry for the room being so large, but okay, that's one of the constraints you have on the number of rooms and everything else. So this panel is about careers in practicing and research engineering. So the idea is to give students the possibility, and those that are no longer students but still are considering to become again students, to give the possibility to hear about careers and take all doubts, I'm joking now, but serious, discussion what a career is and what are the different directions you have in a career, engineering, research, marketing, whatever, big companies, small companies, all these kind of things. So that was a little bit the idea for this panel, I have to thank the speakers in the panel for having agreed to be here. We have a diversity of speakers from the origin, let's put it this way, as you'll see in a minute. And the idea was precisely to have these. So, it's supposed to work, right?
Question from the audience.
Question, sure.
No?
Or was it just echo?
Just maybe go back.
It's not working? Okay, now it's working. Okay, so I'm not doing a presentation, I'm presenting the panel, which is something completely different. So, yes? The sessions are being recorded. Yes, this is being webcasted. Actually, that ended up being one of the reasons for doing this in this room. And then recordings will be put at the website afterwards. Thank you. So, as I was saying, I'm Luís Correia from IST, the University of Lisbon. So I'll be the moderator of this panel. And with us, we have, as you can see, not the order of the photos is not the order of people sitting, but it really doesn't matter. So I will start with the order that you see in the presentation. So we have Anki Ljung. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, you did well.
Thank you. So she's from Ericsson, from Sweden. Then we have Lena Wosinska, and she's a colleague here from the University of Chalmers. Then we have Jane Jeffries from Huawei. Then Patryk is currently a colleague from Poland, but he has a past in companies and so on, entrepreneurship, small, medium enterprises, so he's bringing this perspective as well. And as usually said, last but not least, Ömer Bulakc, I'm not sure again.
Bulakc, yeah.
Bulakc, okay, sorry, thanks. From Nokia, and again, the idea is to have, as I said, different. So what is the idea here? So the idea is, again, having a career in area of telecommunications has always been interesting and challenging one. Every 10 years, we change the world, right? Something like that. So for those working either in research or in technology or in marketing, it really doesn't matter. Every 10 years, you need to sell something new. So this really has been, in the last years, a challenge, or many years ago. These days, in some countries, the number of students that are attracted to study telecommunications is not as large as it used to be. And even those that study telecommunications sometimes end up doing something else. So this is something also that it probably, this image that large companies have and what has to be done in telecommunications, all these things are new in commerce, of course. So the idea is that we discuss a few things. What is a career in communications? And of course, there are many careers depending on where you end up working. What are the general conditions that are available? Of course, we are not going to discuss the pensions and all these kind of things you can imagine, but rather the differences between the different categories. The benefits offered, meaning not again salaries or whatever, but at a larger view, what are the things, the differences between academia and the industry, for example. And of course, the problems that are currently being addressed, not from the technological viewpoint, but from the human resources one, right? This is not a panel about technology. The questions that have been prepared, and actually they came from last year's panel as well. What are the differences between a career in research or in practicing engineering? What are the differences between a career in industry or in academia? What are the differences between a career in large industries or in a startup? Is there a strong mobility of jobs between different companies? Should you switch job every 6 months or never switch a job, so whatever? And of course, how important is the first job to define a career? So these are just a few questions for starting the discussion, and I will go back to these, and then I will ask the colleagues of the panel just to present themselves, and then we start the discussion. So Jane, please.
Perfect, thank you. So hi, I'm Jane Jeffries. I work with Huawei Technologies at our Munich Research Center. I come from a HR background, so I have about 8 years experience across recruitment and HR business partner roles. And yeah, I hope today to perhaps give you some guidance, advice on what exactly that a career in communications, telecommunications can look like. Perfect.
Ömer?
So hi all, thanks for this opportunity. I mean, myself asked these questions to myself during my career, right? I mean, so after, during the Bachelor of Science, you try to find an internship position. Then after you finish Bachelor of Science, you ask yourself, shall I do master's or not? And then it comes to the PhD. You always have these questions all the time, yeah? The same questions. Shall I go for the university? Shall I stay in a company? Can I do the research in the company, etc.? So that's why I think it's quite interesting from my own experience. I'd like to shed some light on these questions, how I decided, and I hope it will be helpful for the students. Personally, I work with Nokia Munich, and I am the program manager for 6G. And and collaborating with colleagues and students in the past, so I hope I can share with some experience with the colleagues here.
Thank you. Patryk?
Hi, my name is Patryk Urban. I come from Poland. I'm now an associate professor at the West Pomeranian University of Technology there in my home country. And I have experience of over nearly 20 years in fiber optic communications, working on a physical layer. On either side, the industry, 10 years with Ericsson, and academia. I moved to a couple of different countries, the Netherlands, Italy, Sweden, now back to home country. And I hope that the experience I could share with you, advices could somehow help you to do the right choices or shed some light on the possible career paths. Thank you.
Thank you. Anki?
Yeah, Anki Ljung, representing Ericsson here today, and also very thankful for the opportunity to come here to discuss career and career decisions and how you actually sort of go about taking them. And I have a kind of maybe not so straightforward career path. Started out in sales and marketing and ending up in HR, which I really, really like. I've been in Ericsson since 2016, working with talent acquisition and working with talent acquisition from, well, spanning recruitment, employer branding, and so forth. So really enjoy being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Lena, please.
Lena Wosinska. I have the master degree in electrical engineering from Warsaw University of Technology. Shortly after my degree, I escaped, by the way, to Sweden. And then I tried to get the certificate, Swedish certificate. And when I got this, I tried to find a job. And the first place I was employed was KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. And in fact, I spent at KTH 32 years, so I don't have much.
You ended up being trapped there. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Which means that I really enjoyed working in academia. Then, after the 32 years at KTH, during this 32 years, I established a research group, pretty successful in optical networking. And in 2018, I moved together with my research group to Chalmers Institute of Technology, University of Technology. So my career will be, my story will be related only to academia, but since we have a lot of collaboration with industry, so maybe I can also bring some insight to this.
Yes, that's the idea, is that, as I said, we have different views. So I think the first question is really what is the difference, since usually we have PhD students and not master students attending these conferences. What is the difference between a career in academia or in research, not academia, in research and industry? Because research, you can do research in universities, you can do research in industries as well. So maybe Jen, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, so I guess I'm with Huawei and it's very focused around research, but in terms of differences, I guess it's going to be in the type of work that you do. So if an individual is, within the research environment, you probably need to be happy with ambiguity, exploring new ideas, where perhaps in a more industry-focused role, your tasks, your objectives, your goals are going to be much more regimented, and you're going to, have clearly defined tasks that you need to work towards. I think that probably from a fundamental perspective and in terms of, what you want to do as an individual and what type of individual you are and what you like doing, that's probably one of the questions maybe you want to reflect on if you're looking at either side. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, there is a fundamental difference maybe in terms of the timeline, how you approach the problems, right? So if you go to, to some extent, the borders between, doing research in the industry and academia may be also blurring in the sense that, even you are working, doing research at the university, you may have some projects and certain timeline restrictions and so on, right? But in a wider sense, you would think that, okay, at the university, you would have a higher degree of freedom in terms of like the assumptions you can make. They can be more like theoretical type of work, and then, the problems may not be so realistic at the beginning, let's put it that way. And then you may have higher degree of freedom working on the problems you want to solve, and then how you start, and so on. And when you do research at the industry, let's say in a general manner, you would have this strict certain deadlines because you are working toward a product. You would like to realize your research into a certain product, and you may be also doing research for standardization. Yeah, there are different approaches basically, and with that, you would have certain constraints how you should deliver your research outcome. And this is, on one hand, it may be like a bit constricted. It can be considered some constraints, but then it's rewarding in the sense that you see the outcome of your research right away. So it can be, like accepted by the standardization. It can be part of the product and so on. So there is this difference, I would say. But of course, there are certain platforms in the industry where you can even do disruptive research. If you think about Nokia Bell Labs, there are like 9 Nobel Prizes available already given to Nokia Bell Labs researchers. So you can have also opportunity in certain platforms to disrupt, right? That's why I would also recommend you go to Danny Korpi. He's one researcher there. He's trying to disrupt how we develop the air interface and with the native AI. So you can ask my colleague in the Nokia booth and how he approaches the research, and I think that will be interesting to discuss with him on that. Yeah.
Patryk, from your background as doing many things, not offending you, of course.
Yeah, thank you. If I compare engineering and research work, I think stress is something what we need to take into account, the level of stress or the kind of type of stress that you get. If you are in an engineering area, you very often need to act sort of on demand to satisfy the customer as well. It's short-term actions. And when you're working in research, somebody said earlier here, it's long-term planning. So, you need to apply for a grant, for instance, right? That takes time and sometimes brings frustration if you do not succeed. It's a different level of stress. So this is my aspect I highlight here.
Yeah. Anki?
Yeah, I think you have pointed out a lot of the key elements, right? But also I think if we look at the broad perspective that you could participate in research and close to product or more long-term development as such and research, I think the methodology and how you go about it, I guess, is one of the key differences between academia and working in the industry, and how you also have hopefully a wider network, more instant network and collaboration within a company, and sort of more applying methods and systematically thinking about selecting tools, etc., for the research part.
Lena, doing research in academia and in industry is different, right?
Yeah, basically, I can say that the way of working in academia has changed over the 32 years I worked at KTH and now at Chalmers. So basically, I can say that in the past, in academia, we did mostly basic research, and we were funded by government, while currently our research is very much dependent on the funding from industry. So here is this collaboration with industry very important. And it means that also we are involved in the, and collaborate with research divisions at companies. I think that the main difference can be that we are in academia, we are judged based on our publications, while in the industry probably it's a different goal. So as a PhD student, for instance, it's important that to reach the level, the degree, it's important to publish a certain number of papers and so on. In academia, in addition to the research, we also have teaching, so it's another part of our jobs. And well, some people are saying that in academia it's more deadlines related. I mean, it's very stressful because you have deadline for papers, deadline for conferences, deadline for. But I think it is similar in industry. You have also deadlines for producing or delivering some things. So here I would not say that it's very much difference in this sense. Mm.
The other big question, and I will start putting questions to the audience, but first, the second round, let's put it this way. Big companies versus small companies or startups, whatever. Jane.
Yeah, so I think we had a bit of a chat about this beforehand, and probably Patryk can give us a good insight. But definitely, I mean, I brought up the topic that in a large company, you're definitely going to have much more structure. Generally, that you have a structured generally career development plan, you're going to have structured salary reviews, these types of elements. And maybe in a startup, it's less structured, but perhaps you might be more successful. Maybe there's a reorg and you become the head of a particular department. So yeah, I guess again, in terms of like reflecting on what you might like to do, what do you as an individual like? Do you like that structure? Do you like to have maybe a potential career path outlined in front of you? Or again, are you maybe happy with that ambiguity and maybe happy with kind of, I guess, you have to maybe, I guess, grind away a little bit within a startup and, it's not so clear in terms of what are the next steps within your career. Yeah, that would be my opinion. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as also Jen said, right? So in the big organization, big companies, you have certain organizational structure. So the machinery is running, right? So then when you first start at that company, you will get, the ramp up very fast, and you will become part of the machinery. And then, especially nowadays, like we are working globally, right? So you have colleagues from the US or, like from different parts of the globe. So you have access to expertise. in the big organization. So, and then there is also the access to information, knowledge, and that's why I think there is the advantage that you can build up knowledge very fast. You can, learn a lot from different experts. You can work with different experts, and so on, so that you can have this knowledge, like this expertise build up faster. In case of startup, I would assume that then you will work in a more dynamic environment. So you should be more risk aware. Your tolerance to the risk should be higher. Maybe even maybe you should be a bit higher, younger, let's say. And then you would learn by doing, in that sense, right? So that is some kind of fundamental, I would say, the difference between working in a big organization or going for a smaller and more dynamic environment.
Patryk, are they right or wrong?
I think in a big company, I think it basically refers to what you guys said. It's easier to stay focused on what you're supposed to do. Again, if you are a researcher in a big company, you have all the facilities around, you have the knowledge base, you have IT support, whatever, right? And then you can really stay on the main track to not divert into different branches, different things around. And that's definitely not the case in a startup environment. If you are a startupper, and worse, if you are the guy who came up, or a girl who came up with an idea and you are starting up a company, then at first you do deep research, right? Then you need to collect a team. Then you need to organize some fundamentals of the startup, look for financing, do accounting, do sales and marketing, as you need to sustain the company, and then perhaps pivot back to research to correct the guys that you just hired that didn't grasp the idea at first. And so the circle goes on. So you are diverted into so many different things before you have the C-level board to run the company. That's one thing. Another thing which I think is the downside or the flow of a large company is the decision process. Very often, if you want to take a decision, depending, of course, on the area, if it's strategically very important, you will take a very quick decision. But very often, you need to go through many management layers. And to get to the point to somebody who's responsible for taking a decision, that can take time. That's not the case in a startup environment. For the first couple of years, you most likely sit in one room, which is the lab at the same time. And then you can take decisions almost right away. So that's my penny to that.
But Anki, even in large companies, they don't work all the same way, right? I mean, they are structured, of course, all the things, but the model is not the same. We hear about Google being the first one, whatever, people could work whenever they want, play billiards in the middle of the day, all this kind of thing. So, I mean, big companies, they don't have the same fixed model, right?
I think the opportunity that we provide is actually that we cater for both having startups within the big organization, which I think is really awesome about Ericsson, that we actually have these bubbles, that you're allowed to try out your different ideas. But also to your point, tagging on to the same that you already mentioned, obviously funding is a big part of it, right? Because money kind of talks and directs you into direction that maybe you didn't really consider from the very beginning. But also the possibility to connect with people that is experts within the fields. It's something that you probably will have to a larger extent in a larger organization. And also if you're within a startup, you could be sort of more or less needing to explore full on that idea that you had. So you will not maybe have the bandwidth to actually enable new ideas coming in, to be that innovation engine that you really would like to see happening in that startup. On the other hand, as you mentioned earlier on, it's also depends on how you work as an individual and where you thrive, because you would like to see that your innovation really kicks in what environment does I really, have my greatest moments. And I think that is super important to actually think about, where would I be my best? There are pros and cons with everything. As I mentioned, we tried to do actually the broad perspective, and we have the capability to do that, being a large organization. But I think it depends. You need to think through, make the list, pros and cons.
Yeah. Lena, do you net from your students a lot of questions? Which job to choose? Let's put it this way.
Well, I mean, I just can say, based on what my previous PhD students told me, I mean, most of my previous PhD students, they work for Ericsson, by the way.
Nice.
We all wonder why.
Yes, I train people for Ericsson, but they are normally very happy, and they also go up in hierarchy after a while. But I think also, I mean, in academia, there is a completely different, let's say, way now. I mean, it's evolved over the years, and recently, or for a few years, it is very competitive. So instead of collaborating in academia, you compete with other colleagues, and I think it's completely sick. I don't like this way. So I think it doesn't happen in companies. I mean, you have a team and you work in the team, right? And here you build a group, and each one in the group would show that he or she is better than the other one. It's not, well, maybe not in all groups, but it is such a trend I have heard.
I would say, unfortunately, we are definitely moving in that direction. I think this is time that we open the floor to the audience. I must warn you that the doors will be open only after we have at least 10 questions from the audience. So if you want to go for dinner, you might as well start right now. So who wants to put the first question to the panel, please? Come forward.
So, hello. Thank you for your insights right now. My first question is more on a personal issue I'm dealing right now as I'm finishing my master's degree, and I am wondering whether should I go for my PhD or should I actually go head first into an industry position. So the question is if a PhD degree is necessary for having a interesting prominent position in the industry as a researcher and research and development position, or is it like a master's degree perhaps sufficient if I want to get some degree of autonomy in research in the industry? That's my question.
Okay, who wants to pick? Patryk?
So I think, I mean, to answer your question just right away, I think PhD would be valued very much, but I don't think this is the ultimate sort of question you should ask yourself. I think the main question you need to ask yourself is, what triggers you? What excites you? What inspires you? What makes you feel the goose skin when you think of it? And if this is something related to a potential PhD, give it a chance. But if not, you would be forcing yourself to do a PhD otherwise.
Shall I take? Because I asked myself exactly the same question. That's right. After masters, you know, like, I mean, okay, after Bachelor of Science, I moved to Germany and doing masters, and it was like, okay, also doing experience abroad and so on. And that's okay, shall I continue with PhD or not? I mean, my methodology was like that. So I said, I mean, I did the masters also at Nokia Siemens Networks back then. I was in the industry working as a student, and then collaboration with the Technical University of Munich and Nokia Siemens Networks back then. I said, if I can write a paper out of my thesis, and it goes to a conference, and you know, I like the whole procedure. You know, I write a paper, you know, it's accepted in a good conference. I couldn't have the chance to present it, but I mean, that was, I said, okay, if I like this process, which will be daily work in PhD time, then I think I should go for it, right? And then that was a good experiment for me. So I wrote papers. It was they were accepted by like good conferences back then. I thought, okay, this is like a nice thing, you know, like even my supervisor gave me the opportunity to write the paper on myself. I thought, oh, okay, I would just contribute partly. But no, as I said, it's your work, so you should be the first author. You write the paper, you know, you go through the process and so on. That was, I think, a good experience. of course, you get also some side benefits, right? And you can, in Germany, you get a title just on your ID, you know, like, so it's, you know, it's here like, it's a cool thing, you know?
Doctor
One
everywhere.
can call you doctor in the corridor.
Everywhere.
Right?
Yeah, they call it, you know, you go to, you know, like appointment, a medical doctor, then they, say, they'll tell you with your title, you know, there are some side benefits, but okay, you can apply this first methodology. If you really like the process, you know, development, and like if you have the chance to go to a conference, try it like this when you are here, right? Yeah. You like it, and you people presenting their work, you get questions. If you really excites you, as Patryk said, then you say, okay, I should proceed with that one. It is very much appreciated also in industry, and especially in companies like you will. I was amazed when I saw doctor engineers at Nokia Siemens Networks back then. Then you will see it in Huawei, you will see it in Ericsson, in many companies, right? So, right.
Yeah.
I could just add that obviously in Ericsson there is a lot of PhD people. However, we also have some very talented and brilliant with masters. So I think it also connecting to what you're saying, that if you are a bit unsure, there is also this possibility to, you know, go there in the next level, try out and see. Again, really see where you're thriving. And I think don't let that hinder you to say that, okay, I will not make this career path if I'm not. Try it, explore it. Obviously, your first job is important, right? But it's not defining your whole career. Thank God. There is possibilities to, like, you know, move around. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other question from the audience? Yes, please. Just pick the microphone.
Hello, hello. You hear me? Yes. So thank you for sharing these nice things with us. But maybe I would like to ask. Let's assume that I have a good idea. I'm looking to move from an employee life to a private business life. What be the best approach? Like, how can I make this transaction smoothly with less risk? This is what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
I can try to handle that one. I'm talking now about my experience. I think I've been at that point in my life, and I first ask myself a question: what is important for me right now? Because opportunities they will appear, some will disappear in course of time. And at that point of time, what was important for me was my family. I got my little kids, and they were just born, and I thought, this is where I want to invest time now. I don't want to go to a private kind of or startup thing, because I know I will get fascinated with that. I'll be gone from home, and that's not what I wanted. And instead of doing that, I actually took 1 year off here in Sweden to take care of my kids. So you need to ask yourself a question: what is right now important for you? Again, I'm living up a question in the air, sorry.
Anyone else?
Just echo. I think that was a very wise decision, or advice rather than decision. But yeah, I would absolutely echo that.
Listen to your heart.
Oh.
This is this advice from Patryk.
Okay, let me say something more. How can a startup business is less risky, or how can you do that in a wisdom way?
Again, may I? I'm taking the complete floor, sorry. I think you need to surround yourself with clever people, smart people, experienced people. People who have perhaps gone through that or are skilled in the area that you want to address with your company. So then you learn from mistakes also from that the others did. You do not reinvent the wheel, sort of, right?
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, okay, I think this was mainly directed to, setting up a startup and so on. So, of course, in the like industry, if you are working for a big company like I think you have Ericsson T-shirt, right?
Ericsson, yeah.
So I mean, how you would basically convert ideas into reality is one hand is okay, patenting, of course, I mean, if you have a very cool idea and then you have a really good inventive step, you can have a great patent that can be adopted by the standards. It can be used by many devices around. And I mean, there's also some financial incentives, of course, being by the companies because there are legal laws and so on. And so, I mean, that's also one way if you are in a company, you can protect your ideas in patents and they can be also financially relevant as a bottom line. That would be, and some companies, I think they also, there are like spin-offs, if you know, the idea may grow and then, you know, like you can first have an internal project and then if it is, it could be really like spin off, like Siemens has a lot of examples on that one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
They are going to charge you on these advices. I don't know if you know that.
There's a percentage cut. Yeah.
But coming back to the stage, let's put it this way. Another thing that we were chatting before was about mobility, right, Jane? We were discussing this. Mobility meaning your first job should be the last one, or you should change every 6 months or whatever. Yeah. Something in between. So I would like to hear the thoughts of all of you on this matter.
I don't know, I guess I'll start. Yep, perfect. So yeah, exactly that. We were chatting about, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of, especially in the US, there's, you know, a lot of press for people job hopping a lot and getting very large salary increases. And you know, I guess it's always somewhere in the middle. You can't, these days, not many people stay in one organization for such a long time. Lots of people do move around. And from my experience, you know, from a recruitment experience, when we are looking at hiring people, we do look at, you know, the longevity that they've had in different organizations. And if you do have someone that has, you know, changed every 6 months, you may question, is it worth investing in that hire? Are they going to leave us after 6 months? And obviously, you know, recruitment costs a lot of money and it costs a lot to train people, and you want to try to keep that, you know, that intellect within the organization. So, you know, I would say probably don't stay with one organization forever, but don't move every 6 months. It's somewhere in the middle. And, you know, you'll find an organization that you like to work for. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything. Sorry.
I can, of course, if we go in the order. So, I mean, from my point of view, I was looking in the potential growth opportunities in that place. I like stability. I think as a human being, typically we like stability. You know, like if you're happy, you are decently happy, you know, or decently unhappy, let's say. And then you can still have career development opportunities. You learn from the others and so on. And then in a foreseeable future, you don't see a blockage, let's say, that, you know, that will block your career and so on. I think that then you would say, that, okay, I would rather stay there because I have the opportunity to grow, I learn from the others, like have close collaboration and so on. But at some point, if you think that, okay, I cannot grow anymore, right, and there's a blocking point, and there might be like the chance to change. That would be my advice. Really looking into, you know, like if I can grow or not, and then if you have the feeling that, okay, it is blocking your career aspirations, then maybe it's time to change.
Patryk, you can even change career, job, not just the.
I think I would always ask myself a question: is this the right time to change for another company, another employer? But the sort of condition that, if satisfied, would be to change is my mission completed? Is the work I've been working on, is the project, is it completed? Is it done? I don't want to leave it just open and to the others. This is my own kind of attitude. And I've done this for every employer or any freelance consultancy I've done, and never just leave it like that. So I can't say it's 6 months, 1 year, or whatever time. Because it's just case by case.
Yeah, I could just say that when you're fresh out of school, all the knowledge that you have received over the years, when you put that in practice, you're actually very new, and sort of dare to stay in that moment that absorbing new experiences will take time and new learnings, and applying that into either be that research or whatever job role is that you're actually quite new in your role, even after a year, or in certain of our job roles, you will be new in your position and will need to be developing into your roles for quite some years, actually. So it depends on what type of job role or career you're seeking. But to your point there, have I learned enough? Am I done here? And I think, also having a lengthy time with one employer doesn't necessarily hinder you, because you have the opportunity to do so much within that company if it's a large company. So it depends on your career path or the ability to create your own career within that company, and the opportunities that are actually in front of you. So I think you need to, again, draw the map and also be a little bit calm about that. You don't need to change, because maybe that is necessarily not beneficial for you and your learning and how you grow in your current or future roles as well.
Then in our area, the equivalent is when they graduate from a PhD, should they go for work, stay as a postdoc, all this kind of things?
I would like to add to this discussion that, in academia, the beauty of work in academia is that you develop yourself all the time. You don't have any limits. So the bad thing is that the salaries are of course much lower than in industry, but on the other hand, it's very inspiring, and I enjoy very much working in academia, and this is, you don't reach this point when you really would like to go somewhere else because you reach the top, you are done. So because you can develop yourself and the group and the research field as long as you wish. So this is very inspiring, and in my case, I enjoy very much working with young people because they are very creative and they give me a lot of good ideas, and so this is another very good thing in working in academia. So as our rector said that we are getting older, but our students are not older. So, so in this is the truth. So working with young people is very, very nice. On the other hand, I would say that these days it's very difficult to find position in academia, unfortunately. For several reasons, I will not go in detail on this, but even if you have lower salary in academia, if you have a chance to try this, I would really recommend.
Moving a little bit topic, I was discussing these matters with someone again from Portugal the other day, and what can be the implications, let's call it this way, of social media when you are going for a job? Meaning people using or too much or too less, if I even dare to put it this way, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these kind of things. Because I was talking again the other day with someone, so she's the head of human resources in an operator in Portugal, and let me tell you the story. It's a 30-second story. She said, last week I did not hire someone from your school, and he was brilliant. I said, oh, so what's wrong with him? Oh, okay, we ended up looking that he was tweeting a lot about his personal life, and we wanted someone to be part of the strategy team, and we were afraid that since he was much into social media, that somehow he could forget that he should not do it that much in companies. I don't want to go into secrets or whatever, or even implying whatever in this case, but in general terms, what can be the relationships between social media on the one hand and, let's say, having a job, a serious job, whatever you want to call it?
I can go first and just to change order a little bit. No, sorry.
Thank you.
No, but I think social media can be super great if you are balanced, right? And that goes in both directions, because obviously if you're a candidate that are applying for position, you would like to know my manager, my future manager, what's the team, then you go and Google people. That is kind of the inverted reference check. But it goes the other way around as well. So I think you need to be aware of that. Depending on what you actually post, it could have an effect on how you are perceived. But it could also be perceived, if you use it wisely, that you come across very, very good as an additional that maybe didn't come through in the interview process or in other steps in the process. So I think you should be mindful, as you should always do with social media. So it's actually not maybe just connected with a hire or with a recruitment process. You should always be mindful, right?
But, when it comes to using social media, yeah, if you use it wisely, that's the point, I think. Because as a researcher at academia, I mean, our job is also to promote our results. And we use LinkedIn to promote this. And LinkedIn is a great thing. Okay, I'm not LinkedIn employee, but LinkedIn is great to find partners for research, to have interesting discussions, inspiring discussions. There are lots of discussion groups. And I think it's quite well organized if you follow certain rules not to divert your attention to other things. So I think that way of using social media is something brilliant. I think it was James Surowiecki in his book Wisdom of Crowds who said that it is the value of the scientific achievement is not in the eye of beholder. It is how the audience, how the community receives this. Then perhaps it actually becomes valuable sooner or later. So it is important that we advocate through, for instance, social media.
But we can advocate this by our publications as well. I mean, I am not very active in social media, by the way. I use LinkedIn, and I think this is a good place, but I value privacy, so I am not super active in social media.
Yeah, I think just coming back to Patryk's point there, where it's how the community receives it. It's the same with your social media, so it's definitely a public persona. And yeah, you should be mindful for this if you are, wanting to execute opportunities within your community, that people potentially will reflect on what you put out into the community.
Yeah, in that particular case, of course, we don't know all details. It sounded a bit not so fair assessment because you may just know the rules, right? Okay, it doesn't mean that you would share company secrets or something like the social media. So I think there should be a differentiation, but I understand there's maybe some bias towards certain people who are using social media very in that direction, right? And other than that, for instance, for our book, just we published, like yesterday from the 5GPP community. And it got a lot of downloads just in one day, like it's more than 6K and so on. And then I think that was the advantage of LinkedIn and all this social media that we use effectively to some extent. And then it just spread, sometimes you see, a CEO of a big company and so on, it is like third level connection. So there are some connections, like Bill Gates, like third level or so on. So you have some connections who are connected to someone that you would not have been connected to like 10 years ago, right? So at the end, I think it can be also like a positive thing for people that using social media effectively. Overall, of course, mindful usage of the social media is critical. I mainly also use the professional platforms for such, particularly LinkedIn, for such promotion of the work, let's say.
So back to the audience. One more question now from the audience. There were only 3, so we are still 7 left to open the doors. No one? Seriously?
Yep, there's one.
Yes. We have a recent graduate that is looking for a job, right, Afif?
I think it's never too late to go back, isn't it? I think we maybe in the future, or not in the near future, we'll see basically more coming back, isn't it, to to academia, to universities. Actually, we see some, after retirement, some of the people of industry, they go back to academia. My question, when listening to you, one have the impression that there is a single model. And I know this is not the case, when it comes especially, the differences between academia and research. It depends basically on the countries. Even within the EU, basically, there might be huge differences. Yeah. And, listening to you, of course, some of you talk Swedish model, German model, or basically the Polish one. I know in some countries you have the opportunity as basically a PhD student, do it at the industry, basically. This is completely sponsored. So you know what's happening, and then it's your decision to stay there or to basically to move. In other countries, you don't have this opportunity. In Sweden, for instance, if you are employed as a PhD, you even basically sponsor basically for your funding your pension, which you are fully employed. So you have certain privileges. And I think this is important for the student to understand, isn't it? Depending on the context and where do you live, you have different models, different options. And also how near are basically industries to academia. This can differ from country to country. If you take the German model sometime, it could be well included. In some other models, basically, the separation is really broad. Maybe, Louis, I don't know, you can talk also about the Portuguese model, the Spanish. It's different, isn't it? And I think this is an important point to lift. Even within the EU, there are, diverse really models.
Indeed, you are completely right. Jane, unfortunately, has to leave in a few minutes. She has a plane to catch.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I'll give the opportunity for, let's say, call it a final statement.
Yeah,
and then you can
so
get
apologies,
out whenever
I
you
have to
want.
leave. But yeah, listen, I guess I hope it was helpful. If anyone, has any further questions or wants to reach out, feel free to, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if anybody would like to reach out, feel free. Maybe just answering in terms of the different models for a study. I'm most familiar, obviously, with the German model. And for us, especially in Huawei, we offer the opportunity to do a PhD within our organization. Also, if students are looking to get internal industry opportunity through their academic PhD, they could come and do an internship with us. And I guess the reason for that is exactly that, to try and get a bit of industry experience whilst you're still doing your study. In Germany, I think the model is quite flexible. And in terms of all that, pension and those elements, you are considered as a employee, so you do get all those full benefits as well. I think in Germany the model is quite flexible, and as an individual, again, we come back to this, you need to reflect on what you want to do and what ticks your boxes, what gives you goosebumps. So probably they're, the real questions that people need to ask themselves, what is it that you want to do? Yeah, but listen, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jen, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to leave.
You're excused.
I will sneak out. Okay. Thank you. No need for a clap. No need. Thank you.
But yes, Afif, indeed. And this comes actually to another topic which is related somehow. But indeed, in the different European countries, just to address Europe, right? The models for taking a PhD and the relationship with industry are completely different. For example, in Portugal, it's a small country, and even in our area, we don't have, the big companies in Portugal are basic sales people and customer support, which you can expect that to be, right, for obvious reasons, I would say. And then this means that most of the people taking the PhD, they end up being at university or research labs, and not that much in companies. So, and this even affects the number of Portuguese students willing to take a PhD, right? That, of course, goes from country to country in a completely different way.
If I may add here, so in Europe, it is an opportunity, for instance, to be part of Marie Curie, it's called Training Network program, where you are employed at some company or at university. You you go towards PhD, but you spend some time at the company if you are employed at the university. and then you have the opportunity to learn how it goes at work at university, and in particular, I think in many universities for hiring academic position, there is a merit if someone spent some time in different places, I mean the mobility. So, and I know that in many European countries it is counted as a merit to not do everything as I did at KTH, to go around and see other places. So this opportunity is, even if you start to work at some universities, so probably you will then be able to go, I mean, for some visits. And if you work at a company, you may collaborate with university, and if you like, then if you find this good opportunity, you can move. So it's not, the first decision is not the final, let's say.
Patryk?
Yeah, in Poland we have something like an industrial PhD program, and that's ministry level funded. So actually the company does not pay anything, nor the university. It is ministry funded. Now, it sounds like a great opportunity, right? Find the right company that's interested in the subject, or perhaps grab an employee from there to run the PhD, right? So this should, in a way, offload financially the company, bring innovation into the company, and of course the university would benefit at the same time. But there is something strange with the mindset of the people in the companies, in the industry. I'm talking locally in Poland. They fear that intellectual property will somehow fly away, perhaps, be unprotected. They actually raise questions, so finally, where the PhD student is supposed to sit, here or at the university? What are the regulations, and so on? And we have the regulations. It is only about the mindset. We as a university are reaching out to companies locally and nationally to execute these PhD, industrial PhD. I did not succeed yet with such a PhD student, but I heard about successful stories, so I hope for the best in the future.
In Sweden, we also have industrial PhD students who are funded by funding agency, not by company, and not by university. So it's a very good opportunity for companies to educate or train our own people.
Yeah. Going back to the audience, any question? Like, what is the salary of a CEO, or what is the brand of the car you can have when you just enter into one of these companies?
I would like to expand a little bit on this last topic about industry PhD position and something like that. Because I know it's usually very common for an industry worker to pursue a PhD with the industry interests in mind. But how about the opposite situation, when you are actually a PhD student for the university exclusively, and then you manage, or perhaps you manage to market your research direction to some company, and they express interest in it, and they decide to fund it? How common do you think this scenario can be, or is?
So you mean that you work for a company, for a university, for the university, and would like to try some time in the company during your PhD studies?
Yeah, I mean, for example, say you are pursuing a research direction that is perhaps also of interest to some local company or national company, and they may express perhaps interest in funding or partake in taking part in the research.
Well, this is in fact possible. I mean, let's say if I have collaboration with Ericsson, and my PhD student is very much involved in this collaboration. So first, it is a door opening for the student after getting the position to go to Ericsson. But also during this, we can have agreement. I mean, me as a supervisor and a colleague at Ericsson who is working with me, that the student will spend some time at Ericsson and sit in their offices and have close discussions with them. Then probably the non-disclosure agreement would need to be signed, but it's not a big issue. So I think this is absolutely possible. I don't know if small companies would be, that flexible, but for large companies, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is also one way of having, okay, not like exactly industrial PhD. I had industrial PhD. In that case, most of the time you sit in the company premises, like you work directly with the people inside the company, and then you spend less time maybe in the academic environment. So, but then you will test more on the industrial experience than the academic experience. Then the other way around is that you sit at the university funded by the companies, and especially the big companies, they do this funding, industrial funding. In that case, you will have this project scope defined, maybe not more into the practical direction because the company has certain interest, maybe longer term research that can be done by the university and so on. Then you still have these interactions with the company employees, right? And you understand their point of view, the requirements, the restrictions. Maybe you can make even patents together based on the agreements, the contractual agreements you have. So then your main footprint would be at the university, but you will still have this experience because the project is defined together, right? And you will also talk with the engineers. You understand their points, their perspectives, and why they think that certain solution is not good because maybe it's not practical and so on. So that's it's a different trade-off, like different portions of experience in both lengths, I would say.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other question from the floor? Yes, please.
Well, I'm involved in one of these ITN projects, so I'm here for my industrial secondment. I experience both the academia and industry, and we have lots of training in this project. So I'm not only focusing on my project, but different things. So my question will be, who will benefit from this training more, academia or industry? And also I see a trend like people starting in industry and going back to academia. So when should someone do such a thing? When someone will reach in a certain position in industry that will be really valuable for academia.
Well, I have some colleagues who moved to academia from industry for a professor positions. They worked as researchers in the research division at Ericsson, by the way. And then they were very known researchers and got positions in academia as professors and built a group, also research group, and became very famous, by the way. So
we have done these things, these collaborations over the years. I think back to your questions, when you should do that, I think that is also connected to what we discussed earlier on, right? It's hard to have like the magic, now is the time. I think you need to evaluate those situations when you think that there's the right time for you individually, and also have a dialogue both with academia and obviously the employer. So I think a combination of the two, right?
And when the opportunity arrives, for instance, when, let's say, some university opens a position, professorship position, and you are at this level, then you can apply. Then you can think, okay, what is better for me, to build the research area in academia or to stay in industry? To move from industry to academia, it's also possible. I mean, the lower level, let's say you have master degree, you work for some company, and then you change your mind that, oh, I would like to do PhD. Then you still can change your path and apply for PhD position and resign from industry, or maybe to take advantage of this industry PhD position, for instance. But as you said, you need to feel when it's the right time for you to make this change.
So perhaps I can partly answer that question. How was it with me again? I think this was the point of time where I needed some more freedom, in a way, to realize my own genuine ideas that were perhaps not necessarily within the strategy of my current, those days, employer. And that was the moment for me, yeah, I think I need to move. At an expense of lower salary, of course. That is what is basically, I mean, it's a common denominator across countries, I think, that is underpaid usually in academia. So at the same time, I already had a broad network of contacts, so I had fair chances to get partners for research projects. I have the right sort of management experience of how to manage a research team. So these were like kind of coordinates to me, okay, now I'm ready. And also private life was actually settled by that time, so yeah, I'm ready. That was the case with me.
Yeah, I think this part that also partly answers the question from you, right? I mean, why should I do PhD or not? I mean, that's definitely a career path you can follow. My university professor back at Aalto University, he worked at Nokia for some years, and then he moved to the university. And I think so in certain countries, this industrial experience is very valuable, right? Because you will be funded by the industry, you can get projects from the industry, you understand how the industry works. In that sense, you can say that, okay, yeah, I get this experience from the industry, I understand the requirements. If I go back to the university, I can easily get funding from the industry. I think there are also quite some such examples, and I think what Patryk said is also very valuable. That when you see that, okay, I want my independence. Like I can have my own, somehow like your own company, right? This university is kind of their own institute. You have your PhD students, like your employees, and so on. Yeah, that would be the right moment maybe to move from academia to the industry.
Any other question from the audience? No?
No?
Okay, yes, please. Come forward.
Hi, Luis and the panels. Thank you for a great panel here. And firstly, I'm very happy that not many people in our field have career problems compared to last year. And I have two questions. So I think the kind of thing of today is how to decide or how to choose between industrial academia in a broad view. And I'm currently a postdoc from Chalmers here in Sweden. And I think it's like a common question among our colleagues, like how to make decisions at this stage, since, for instance, in Sweden, we have the opportunities of work with both academic people and a lot of exciting, for instance, Euro projects. So we have experience from both sides. But sometimes it's hard to answer the question, like Patryk brought it before, which I really like. It's like when you decide to change your company or position, it's important to ask yourself, am I done here? So I would like to ask, like, how, for instance, for postdocs, it's normally hard to answer that question, since I really don't know if I'm done with academia or. Yeah, that's my first question. And the second question is about decisions. So I think when you make decisions, it's sometimes important to find the things you're really excited about and have passion about. So I would like to ask every one of you, can you please share a very short experience on your decisive moment in your career path where you find things you really like and that at that point sort of changed your career path? Can you please share that small story with us? Thank you.
May I say, well, it's not about me because, as I mentioned, I didn't change my career path. But looking to my students and postdocs, I would say that to get the permanent position in academia, at least in Sweden, is pretty difficult. I think in other countries too. So you can, if you are, if you are moving around as a postdoc in different universities, finally, if you like research, academic life and academic work, then I think you finally find some place where you will get the position. But in general, it's pretty difficult. But it's, I think that people are also enjoying, such short-term work like postdoc, 2 years here, 2 years there. But unless you have family, and it's difficult to, to move around with the family. So it's not always depending on your feeling that now it's time I will move. It's sometimes, the opportunities, so there are no, how to say, synchronized with your own plan. And one should count on this as well, I think.
I don't know, anyone else on the Ömer?
Yeah, maybe for the first part, if I should move away from the postdoc, it's fun, and so on. I mean, as we also mentioned, you can, even in the companies, you can continue being part of the European projects, you will see a lot of colleagues from different companies, big companies here, part of the European projects, leading or contributing and so on. So, and I understand that the postdoc maybe, it's short, you get short-term contractual availability, and then if you say, okay, I want to have more stability, right, in a company, I continue, and then I can still be part of the research community, I can do disruptive research, or part of new projects, for instance, we have the HexaX and HexaX2, kind of you can disrupt or contribute to the next generation, right? So it's still possible, I think. There, if you want to have more stability and be part of such organization to grow and to work with other experts inside the company, you may take that decision, right? And then I think there was this question, okay, if there is some story. I mean, I would say personally, what I have seen, typically we are trying to reach a state where you feel more comfortable and you stay in your comfort zone, right? Maybe postdoc is your comfort zone. Then you say, okay, we can debate offline. So then you say, stay postdoc, I know how it works and so on. So I personally have the feeling that when you get out of your comfort zone, maybe take over some challenges, and then in the short term, you may get the pain, you may feel the pain, but it will help support your growth potential and so on. So that might be something that you say, okay, I get out of my comfort zone, and maybe I will grow with the challenges,
So yeah, I would also drop a penny here. I think. Well, first of all, research is never done. Sort of, we can't say it that way, right? You are running a research project on a certain idea. It can be never done, because you can always go deeper and deeper and find new research opportunities or subjects sort of there within this area. But you need to set some kind of gateways or checkpoints to yourself. Is this enough for me? Am I done with that? But the research is not necessarily finished. It will never be. So this was the case with me. I was working on fiber to the home technologies, and then mobile front haul based on fiber optics. And at some point, this was not really in the core interest of the fiber to the home of my current employer those days. So I thought, okay, my sort of usefulness here is done. That's done, but not research. And I went with this research ideas somewhere else and developed that further. So it is about setting up your own kind of checkpoints, gateways, borders, whatever you call it.
Yeah, adding on to that, I would say that we definitely at Ericsson had similar, as you have mentioned earlier on, that you can continue with your research. We could do different combinations of that that would suit you. Are they massive amount? No, it's not. But it's definitely something that we would like to see more of, but we definitely have done that. So going back and forth between academia and into the industry, and also cross-working, part-time. There are different examples that we actually find solutions together on like a good, when you maybe not are totally ready to leave. Also, the defining moment, me being the HR person here then, maybe not so tag into the engineering field or the research field, but for me, definitely, I go a lot on where do I feel mostly engaged? When I wake up at the morning and think, oh, great, new day, new opportunities, new things to solve. The day when I, like on a Sunday, think, oh, gosh, oh, it's work tomorrow, then I'm done. And then I need to change a path, and that is not necessarily just connected to a specific role, but I did change my path. I started out, as I mentioned earlier on, with sales marketing, working with business development and processes and so forth, and I switched that into human resources, and I never sort of looked back, but I still have a lot of sales. I can't disconnect from that, but for me, I'm super passionate of getting people their next, even if within their job role or to the next job role, and how you build your career. So I think we have connected back to that. What makes your passion? That is where you need to find, and sometimes it's quite difficult, and sometimes you need to just make sure it takes time to define what that is. And it's okay that it takes time. That would be yeah.
Thank you. We need to close this panel because there's one starting at 5:30 and there is no interval in between, so there's some logistics to take care. I don't know if any of you would like to make any final statement about today's panel, any advice, final advice, whatever. Yeah. Ömer?
Well, I would say there are quite a vast amount of opportunities, and especially if you are mobile, you can move between the countries, you can adapt to different models and so on. And then even like in your first job, you are frustrated. Maybe you didn't think that this was the best one for you. I mean, it may be something good for your next career steps and so on. I mean, that there is this famous, I think, video from Steve Jobs at the Stanford University, and he was kicked out of his own company. Yeah? But he said that at that moment, maybe it was the worst thing that happened to him. But then he was saying, okay, it was actually the best thing then in the long term, right? If you look into the whole history and so on. I think with all these opportunities, you can learn something, you can adapt, and then you can get some key lessons out of this, and then you move on and you make use of it in the next step. Yeah.
Patryk?
Yeah, a short one from my side. I've run several interviews with people on different career stages for the IEEE Photonics news over the last 2 years. And I would like to quote one person. It's actually Gemma Vallosera, Dr. Gemma Vallosera, who is the head of AI at Ericsson, a good friend of mine. And she said that you should never be afraid to learn, whatever learn means. Is this learning a new environment because you moved, a new country, a new technology, new people around you? Don't put limits onto yourself and take advantage of opportunities that come up. And she's the best example of this, because she started as an optometrist, as far as I remember, something totally different. Went through optical fiber communications, quantum technologies, and right now head of AI at Ericsson Research. So that's it. Thank you.
Anki, please.
Just a short comment that even though you make a decision on your career tomorrow, that doesn't define you. You can change. It's not like end of. If it doesn't suit you, if it doesn't make you sort of move to the next level where you feel that you need to be, change. That would be my.
Thank you,
yeah,
Lena.
Yeah, please. Again, not be afraid to stuck with, because that I stuck at the university was not because I just were not able to change, because I loved the university. I mean the work with young people with research, and I could develop myself every day. So basically. It's up to you to write your future. I mean, to decide about next steps, and you can enjoy whenever you work. You can enjoy the work. If you don't, then you can move. It's not the last thing.
Okay, as I said, there's a panel in 7 minutes, so. We need to finish this one. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I did. discussing about career, students, what to do. And of course, I would like to thank, Jane had to leave earlier, as you may remember, but I would to thank Ömer, Patryk, Anki, and Lena for accepting this invitation for a non-technical panel in the technical conference. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.